Okay, I felt it only right that baseball season is coming to an end. Uh, it's time to, I guess, do a eulogy or something for the 2021 Twins. Uh, Disaster, fucking disaster of a season. Um, is it the worst? Is it the biggest flop season they've ever had as a franchise? I mean, that's you can have that argument. I certainly would put this up there. It's got to be. I mean, no one was expecting. Last night now they lost and clinched last place. You're coming off two straight division titles. You had a what you thought was a pretty lucrative off season. You're planning to you're planning to go for it again, and you finish last in a division that has the Tigers and the Royals. Um, you finished worse than the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers, who are two of the of all the teams in baseball. They were two of the ones that were trying the least this year, and they still finished ahead of you. Um, just a disaster. I mean, top to bottom, just a complete fucking disaster. No one escapes blame. Front office had a fucking. I feel comfortable saying this the worst off season any that that this franchise has ever had. You know, the only good one was bringing back Cruz, um, and of course then you flip Cruz for Joe Ryan, who might prove to be something. But you know, you sign Andrelton Simmons, who won't get vax, and then you have COVID issues at the start of the season. That kind of you know the season didn't go off the rails because of that, but it's a contributing factor. You know, he was okay on defense, didn't hit at all, kind of and he was blocking, and his presence was blocking Nick Gordon from getting a shot for so long. It's just this cascading thing of signing Simmons, and in general, he's just not a very likable individual. He's definitely one of my least favorite Twins of all time. Obviously, the big ones are the pitching moves were all a fucking disaster. You bring in J Happ, who's terrible, but now suddenly he's not that terrible with the Cardinals. You bring in Matt Shoemaker, who is even worse. But of course, you don't actually get rid of him until he actually criticizes the coaches, which is interesting considering the improvement that other pitchers have made once they've left here, like J Happ, like Kyle Gibson, um, like Lance Lynn. Like there have been a lot of examples. Um, you do the big bullpen makeover. It's a complete fucking disaster. Alex Colomé. I mean, middle of the season he wasn't terrible, but by then the games didn't matter anymore. And part of why they didn't matter is because he was so bad early in the season. He just blew game after game after game. He was like historically bad. And even like the here at the end of the season, he gets out there and he'll still give up a run or two every fucking outing. It's just oh, one of the worst signings they've ever had. um, they had the big bullpen makeover, complete fucking disaster. I mean, I don't know if you feel good about much of anything with that, other than like Caleb Thielbar kind of showed he can be something, and a couple of the guys they cycled through from the minors showed some flashes, but Hansel Robles was terrible. Taylor Rogers got hurt. Um, Duffy wasn't what he used to be. You know, you had some other injuries. You guys like Stashak would get hurt. It was really just a disaster. And you fucking give Randy Dobnak a 5-year contract extension for no reason, and then he barely gets out there. And when he does get out there, he's fucking terrible. He's not a major league pitcher. I don't know. I can't. It's going to be infuriating next spring when they try to trot him out there again as a viable option for like a fifth starter. He's not a starter on a team that can compete. Not this version. He like his little brief spurt a couple years ago, like that was just a little fluky thing that got figured out real fast, and he's been awful ever since, and he's never going to be good again. And I guess you're stuck with him because you fucking signed him to a 5-year contract for no reason. Um, you know, Other injury, Smeltzer was hurt, Thorpe was hurt. These guys that you've been kind of waiting on, hoping they would develop into something, they all got hurt. You had injuries in the minor leagues. two prospects who you were hoping were gonna, we're gonna maybe get up here this year, like the Duran and a couple others. But you know, you gotta, you cycle through some starting pitchers. Bailey Ober looks like he's all right. Like he can be in your rotation. Joe Ryan, wasn't very good his last start, but he's mostly been. Looks like he's like a legit guy that you can count on uh, going forward. Everyone else is just kind of just a disposable guy. Like if Griffin Jacks or Charlie Barnes are on this rotation next year, I mean it's another last place team. Um, you know, just he had injury issues all up and down the roster. Buxton had another lost season. Basically, he missed. I don't even know what the total number of games was, but I mean, when he got out there, he was as good as he's ever been. But and he's finished the season out here, but he missed huge chunks of the season. Midget Garver got the worst injury in the history of the world. Um, and he missed a bunch of time, and you know you've had your Kepler was hurt, and Donaldson actually was probably one of the more healthy guys. He missed some time early, but he mostly has been out there. Um, Arise dealt with injury, like they couldn't keep anybody healthy, and the core group that you've had, like most of them were a disaster. I mean, the only guy from the core, like the core that they've talked about for years, and that's been up here, and obviously a big chunk of that core was a big part of the previous two seasons. But I mean, Buxton got out there when he was out there and was really good. Polanco had a great season. He was kind of a slow start, but I think he's got like 30 home runs. He's ended up having a great season. But Kepler's completely fallen apart. Sano, look, he was a little more decent, towards the end of the season. But Jesus fucking Christ, this guy's been around for like 7 years now. Are we really gonna pretend that he's turned the corner? Like he's just what he is. I mean, I think the only reason he's going to be back next year is because he's under contract, and I don't think they would trade him. So that's the only reason he's back. If this was the off season where they could pay him as a buyout and get rid of him, I think they would. You know, you got Kirilloff up here. He got hurt. Like he looked like something, but then he gets hurt. Rooker's been up here. You know, we haven't seen a lot from some of these other young guys that were supposed to be kind of the next wave. Um, Nick Gordon got up here finally, and he looked okay, but he's not like a huge difference maker. And the thing I can't get over is how fucking fast this thing was over this season, because they had a good start. They were 5-2. They had that blowout win in the home opener over Seattle, and after that, it's just a disaster. I was looking it up. I mean, they were like more than 10 games out of first place, and like 15 games under 500 or something by Memorial Day. It was just that it was like gone. Decent start, and boom, it's over. And they've had 4 months where they've just been playing out the string. That's why I don't even know. Like, do we care that they've been basically a 500 team the last couple months, but do we care? I mean, they had, like in August they had like 3 straight series wins against first place teams. Like they've competed fairly well the last couple months, but do we care? I mean, does it matter at all? These when the games mattered, they were awful this year. They looked like they were heading for 100 losses. They haven't even officially lost 90 yet. But does it matter? I mean, when these games mattered, they were awful. And I hope that's not. I hope they're not going to look at it like, oh well, we were good the last couple months. We were right there with a lot of contenders. Like, who cares? Your season was a disaster. It was already a disaster by that point. So then it's like, what to look ahead to. I mean, it seems pretty fucking hopeless that this team's going to be good again for a long time. Falvey came out last week, I know, and had like met with the media or had a press conference or something, and he said something along the lines of, that they're not planning to rebuild, that they're really going to try to compete. We don't know what that means. I mean, it's like we've heard it all before. Are they going to actually spend money? There's a lot of money coming off the books that they were spending this year that they're not spending anymore. Obviously, the Barrios money is gone. Cruz is gone. You know, some of these other free agents that they signed, they'll be gone. They're going to have money. And the poll ad pocket protectors will say, "Oh, it's not about spending money." Well, it kind of is. Like if they're going to go into next year with one of the lowest payrolls, potentially, I don't know where they would stand at this point. They're not going to compete. If if they want to compete in 2022, it's simple. Go out, spend real money on at least one starting pitcher. Because I don't know what the hell they're going to do with the starting rotation. Because Brios is gone. Maeda, he's having Tommy John surgery. You might see him at the very end of next year at best, but you don't even know what you're going to get if and when he comes back. I think they're probably going to bring back Pineda. I feel like that's kind of the reason they rushed to get him back out there for a few starts at the end of the season just to see what they got. They like him. I'm fine with them bringing him back, but he can't be your opening day starter. I mean, if he's your number one, you're going to finish in last again. And he's had some major health stuff this year. So, and then you got a bunch of young guys, the Obers and Ryans and God forbid Dobnak. I'm gonna be so fucking mad if Randy Dobnak is if he's making anything other than an emergency start for the Twins next year. I'm gonna be absolutely in a rage. And maybe a couple other guys, maybe a couple other minor leaguers will be ready. But I mean, you're not gonna go into next year with like 3 or 4 essentially rookies and compete. That's not going to happen. Even in a weak division, that's not going to happen. But yeah, like that's the only way I see they can compete next year is if they really spend money on starting pitching, not the hey, well, Matt Shoemaker was okay like 5 years ago. Let's sign him for a couple million. Or hey, Jay Happ was once okay. Let's sign him and have him penciled in as like our number 3 best starter. Can't do it. And I don't know the names. I didn't look at the names to see what guys are going to be out there, but there's always guys. And we've signed some free agent pitchers in the past to multi-year deals, but it's never been like the top echelon guys. And I don't know who's out there. We've signed Ricky Nolasco and Phil Hughes and Irvin Santana, and he worked out. But you know, if they're serious about competing next year, and I don't really believe that they are, that's the way to do it. Is you got to really spend money on pitching. You have to. Um, and hope for the best with the lineup. I mean, I don't think they're going to make any major changes there. I think the guys they've got under contract they're going to keep. I don't think Sano's going to get traded. I don't think Donaldson's going to get traded. I guess the big one is what are they going to do with Buxton? That's another one. Like if you want to be taken seriously as an organization, sign Buxton. Give him a contract extension. Yes, it's a fucking risk. We all know the injury situation with him. It's a huge risk. But guess what? You gotta occasionally take a fucking risk. And I think he's worth taking the risk for. Because, we've seen what kind of player he is. He seems to want to stay here. He seems to like playing here. You don't have to give him the biggest contract in the history of sports to get him, I don't think. I mean, and yeah, he might get hurt again, and maybe he will never play like 140, 150 games. But they're just pocketing this fucking money. They're not spent. They don't invest in the team. I don't know where. I don't know. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh well, they signed Josh Donaldson, so see they'll spend money. Yeah, they'll make a decent sized contract, offer to someone once every 5 years. Like, and and of course Donaldson has basically been a flop. I mean, his numbers were decent this year, but last year when it really could have mattered, he missed most of the shortened season and wasn't there for the playoffs. So you kind of signed him for a team that you're not anymore. So I don't know, but like you gotta fucking sign the guy. Just do it. Just sign somebody. Show this fan base, because your fan base is fucking dwindling, man. Their attendance was bad this year. Even post you know limited capacity, like their attendance was really bad. Yeah, a lot of that's just the team was already bad by the time you could have a full attendance, but like you know they're not getting TV ratings, they're not getting attendance, they're not getting this is a franchise that's not doing very well right now, I don't think. And part of it is I think there's just been an erosion with hope in the fan base that this ownership will never really go for it. You know, there's still a lot of reason to be pissed off from a couple years ago when they had a team that looked like they could maybe compete for a World Series, and they didn't do anything at the deadline to really bolster the roster at all. And maybe it wouldn't have mattered because we played the Yankees and we know how that goes, but they didn't do anything last year either. You know, there's things you can do and they don't do them, and I can understand. I'm one of the cynics about this ownership. I just don't believe they really care about winning. I think they care about competing. I think they'd prefer to be competitive. I don't think they want to finish in last place and basically spend 4 months out of 6 just playing out the string. I don't think they want that, but I don't think they care enough to really go for it. And I think that's a part of why this franchise is what it is. Just a essentially a bottom feeder. I mean, they'll have pop up years. They'll compete because a lot of years this division is really bad, and this was another year where the division was really bad because you got a lot of mid market teams and they're not always competitive, and there's always going to be there's always going to be an opening every few years to win this division, and they've taken advantage of that, but they never do it. They never go beyond. They never do anything beyond September, and obviously this year they didn't do much of anything before September either. But I think the franchise needs a jolt of positivity. I don't know where they're going to get it. If it's from making a big splash signing in a starting pitcher, or if it's Buxton giving him an extension, or maybe a trade. I mean, they obviously made the Maeda trade a couple years ago, and that for a year it worked out. You know, we still don't really know if this front office can develop pitchers particularly, but just overall players, like they're going to have to. And I think there's not a lot of positivity and not a lot of reason for hope with this franchise as this season dribbles to a close, because I frankly just don't believe them when they say they're going to really make the effort to compete next year. I think they're probably going to just say, fuck it, we're going to go into another rebuild, which is bad enough to go into a rebuild after the 2000s run, when you never won a World Series and really had no playoff success at all, and then you go into the desert for most of the 2010s. You finally think you're coming out of it with the Buxton, Sano, Kepler, that group, and they give you no playoff success either. And now it's like, oh, you're going to go back into another rebuild, when the next rebuild might just end up the same fucking place as the last one. And knowing that this ownership will just not, until proven otherwise, they don't do what it takes to win. And I get the cynicism. It feels very hopeless for this franchise that they're going to ever kind of change their identity as what they are, because I think their identity is as a loser. They're just they're a losing franchise. They're just they're like they're still so content It's like this. They never got rid of the Metrodome mentality where we're a poverty-stricken franchise and we can't really spend and we can't hope to really compete. But maybe once in a while we'll pop up and do something and everyone pat them on the head and say that they did good, even if they get swept in the playoffs. And it's not good enough anymore. It's just not, man. I mean, no playoff wins, not a game, not a single playoff game win since 2004. 17 years. It's practically, I don't even know what the actual date was. I think it was like October 5th. So we're almost at the exact date. Like 17 years since they've won a playoff game, let alone a series, just a game. You know, do the math, 19 years since they've won a playoff series, 30 years since they won a World Series or won a pennant even. And it doesn't seem like there's much hope for any of those streaks to end. And it's kind of this was just that kind of a season. That kind of a season just kind of sucked whatever hope may have been left. It just kind of sucked it right out of you. But we'll see. I mean, so they're gonna have to do something because you know, like if nah, I don't think it'll happen. But if the Timberwolves ever actually become a contender again, like the Twins are fourth in this town of the big four. They would be a distant fourth, and you know, it shouldn't have to be that way, but it kind of is. And we'll see what they do in this offseason. But I think I know they don't want thing. They better not have another flop off season like they just did, because I don't know how this front office can survive it. I mean, we might be talking about firings a year from now if they flop again. So 2021 Twins, we bury you. You failed. You were awful. Somehow they were 4-3 in games I went to though. So when I saw them, they were fine. These other games, I mean, if they want to give me season tickets, and then I'll show up and then maybe have a winning record. But yeah, just they're gonna have to do something, and we'll see what they do.